Fuel was leaking mid-flight. Then a 17-year-old student pilot took control. Even as a small child, she would stare for hours at the planes flying overhead, imagining what it would feel like to be inside one, soaring above the clouds. The way the sun reflected off the wings, the sound of engines humming in the distance, and the sheer freedom of flight filled her with excitement. She would ask endless questions about airplanes, engines, and how pilots managed to keep planes in the air. Her parents encouraged her curiosity, taking her to air shows and letting her spend time at local airports. They could see that Emily's love for flying was not just a hobby, it was her passion. By the time Emily turned 14, she had already started learning the basics of aviation. She joined a local flight school and spent her afternoons reading textbooks about aircraft mechanics, flight controls, and navigation. While most teenagers were focused on video games or hanging out with friends, Emily was practicing radio communications, memorizing cockpit instruments, and studying emergency procedures. Her instructors quickly noticed her dedication and patience. She was not the type to rush through lessons. She wanted to understand every detail to be prepared for anything that might happen in the sky. Her weekends were often spent at the airfield. She would watch pilots taxiing planes on the runway, absorbing everything they did. She asked questions about why they adjusted flaps in certain ways, how they calculated fuel needs for different distances, and how weather conditions could affect a flight. Each answer she received seemed to deepen her fascination. She began to imagine herself in those cockpits, mastering each instrument and navigating through the sky with skill and confidence. Her dream was clear. She wanted to be a pilot, not just in theory, but in reality. By the age of 16, Emily had already completed her first solo flight under the careful supervision of her instructor. It was a moment that made her realize how far she had come. The world looked different from the air, the fields, rivers, and roads forming patterns that seemed impossible from the ground. She felt a mixture of nervousness and exhilaration. Being alone in the sky for the first time was both frightening and liberating. It taught her responsibility and focus. She learned that flying was not about thrill alone. It was about precision, calmness, and awareness. Every control had a purpose, every decision mattered, and every second in the sky required attention. Even after her first solo flight, Emily continued to train diligently. She knew that to become a truly skilled pilot, she had to practice regularly and face challenges deliberately. Her instructors often praised her determination, noting that few students were as disciplined or committed at such a young age. Emily would wake up early, check the weather reports, inspect the aircraft, and review flight plans before each lesson. She understood that preparation was as important as flying itself. Mistakes in aviation could be dangerous, and she wanted to ensure that she was always ready. Emily's friends sometimes teased her about her obsession with planes. While they were busy with parties or social media, Emily was learning about air traffic control procedures, emergency checklists, and how to read topographical maps. But she did not mind. She knew that her passion was unique and she embraced it fully. The thrill of learning something complex and mastering it gave her more satisfaction than any temporary fun could provide. She often shared stories about flights, describing the way clouds appeared like oceans or how the sun set across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her friends would listen in awe, realizing that Emily saw the world in a way they never had. As Emily approached her 17th birthday, her training intensified. She was preparing for longer flights, more complex maneuvers, and emergency procedures that tested both her skills and her nerves. She practiced simulated engine failures, emergency landings, and navigation under challenging conditions. Her instructor emphasized the importance of remaining calm under pressure, explaining that even the most experienced pilots could face emergencies unexpectedly. Emily took these lessons seriously. She visualized different scenarios in her mind, imagining how she would respond if something went wrong. She practiced keeping her breathing steady, making decisions quickly, and staying focused despite fear or distraction. One of her favorite parts of training was learning about fuel management. She understood that fuel was the lifeline of any flight. Knowing how much fuel was available, how quickly it was being consumed, and how to respond in case of leaks or miscalculations was crucial. Emily would spend hours calculating fuel needs for hypothetical flights, double-checking her math, and asking instructors for feedback. It was meticulous work, but she enjoyed it. Every calculation was a puzzle, and solving it meant she was one step closer to being a competent and safe pilot. Emily also loved the hands-on experience with the aircraft itself. She learned how to inspect the engine, check the fuel lines, and understand how each part worked together. Her instructors often mentioned that she had a natural intuition for mechanical systems. She could spot small issues that others might overlook and always approached maintenance with care. This attention to detail gave her confidence, knowing that she could handle not just flying, but also understanding the aircraft she relied on so heavily. By the time Emily was 17, she was no longer just a student pilot. She was a young pilot in her own right, ready to face the challenges that came with flying. She had grown in confidence, skill, and maturity. She knew that the sky could be unpredictable, that emergencies could happen at any time, and that being prepared was the key to survival. More than anything, she had developed a calmness under pressure that was rare for her age. She was ready to take on solo flights with greater responsibility, carrying not just the aircraft, but also the lessons, knowledge, and discipline she had cultivated over years of hard work. On a bright Saturday morning, Emily was scheduled for one of her routine solo training flights in a small Cessna 172. The air was crisp, the sun rising to paint the fields in golden light. Her instructor, Mr. Harrison, went over the pre-flight checklist with her one last time. He emphasized the importance of double-checking everything: instruments, fuel, controls, and communication equipment. Emily listened intently, nodding, absorbing each detail as if it were second nature. She knew that even though it was a routine flight, anything could happen in the sky. With the checklist complete, Emily climbed into the cockpit, feeling the familiar mix of excitement and focus. She fastened her seatbelt, adjusted the controls, and reviewed the flight plan once more. The engine roared to life under her hands, vibrating gently as it warmed up. She felt a sense of connection with the aircraft, as if they were partners embarking on a shared journey. The runway stretched ahead, inviting her to take flight. As the plane accelerated down the runway, Emily felt the familiar lift as the wheels left the ground. She looked down at the earth, slowly shrinking below her, and then ahead to the endless blue sky. The wind brushed past the fuselage, carrying with it the promise of freedom and adventure. She was in control, responsible for every action, every decision. And though she was just 17, Emily felt ready. She was prepared to face whatever challenges the sky might throw at her, confident in her training, her instincts, and her determination. The morning air was calm as Emily climbed higher into the sky, the Cessna humming steadily beneath her. Everything seemed normal at first. The countryside stretched out below like a patchwork quilt of green and gold, rivers reflecting the sunlight like ribbons of silver. Birds darted across the horizon, and the occasional cloud drifted lazily by. Emily felt confident, just as she always did during her training flights. She monitored the instruments carefully, keeping track of altitude, speed, and heading, as she had been taught. Her focus was sharp, her mind alert, and yet there was a sense of peace in the rhythm of flying. Suddenly, a faint smell of gasoline reached her nose. At first, she thought it was a trick of the wind, or maybe a faint odor from the fuel tank she had checked during pre-flight. But then she noticed something unusual on the fuel gauge. The needle was dropping faster than it should. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She knew immediately that something was wrong. Fuel should never deplete this quickly during a short training flight. Her mind shifted into high alert, recalling every emergency procedure she had memorized over the past few years. She checked the fuel lines, glanced at the cockpit, and confirmed what she had suspected. There was a leak. The smell was stronger now, a sharp, unmistakable scent of gasoline. Panic threatened to rise, but Emily forced herself to take a deep breath. This was not the time to panic. She reminded herself of what her instructors had drilled into her. Stay calm, assess the situation, and act methodically. Emily reached for the radio and keyed the transmitter. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," she said clearly, her voice steady despite the rising tension in her chest. "This is Cessna 172, student pilot Emily Thompson. Fuel is leaking. I am at 5,000 feet, heading northeast, requesting emergency instructions." She waited for a response, listening carefully to the crackling voice of air traffic control coming through the headset. Each second seemed to stretch endlessly. The leak was real, and the consequences could be serious. Emily's training kicked in as she reviewed her options, identifying the nearest landing strip, calculating whether she had enough fuel to reach it, and preparing for an emergency landing if the engine failed entirely. The situation grew more urgent as the engine began to sputter slightly. Emily's hands were steady on the controls, but her mind raced. She had always prepared for emergencies in theory, but now she was living one. She thought about the countless hours she had spent practicing emergency drills, about the diagrams she had studied of fuel lines, and about every piece of advice her instructors had ever given her. It all came together in a sudden clarity. She had the knowledge. She had the skill. Now she had to act. Emily scanned the landscape below, searching for a safe place to land if things went badly. She spotted a small airfield in the distance, just barely visible through the morning haze. It was not a large airport, just a single runway surrounded by open fields, but it was her best option. She calculated the distance quickly, factoring in her current speed, altitude, and the decreasing fuel levels. Her hands moved with precision, adjusting the throttle and gently manipulating the yoke to maintain a steady descent. Radio communication continued with air traffic control, who guided her through the process as calmly as possible. Emily, maintain heading, reduce altitude gradually, and prepare for an emergency landing, they instructed. Their calm voices helped her focus. She repeated their instructions in her mind like a mantra, reminding herself to stay steady. Every second counted, and every movement had to be deliberate. Despite the fear threatening to creep in, Emily found a strange sense of control. She thought back to the countless hours she had spent practicing landings, reading the wind, and understanding how the plane responded in different conditions. She realized that her preparation had not been in vain. The lessons she had once found tedious, calculating fuel, checking instruments, practicing emergency landings, were now saving her life. Her confidence grew with each careful maneuver. As the plane descended, the engine's sputtering became more pronounced. Emily knew that she could not waste any more time. She adjusted the mixture and throttle, keeping the plane steady while ensuring the fuel was being used as efficiently as possible. She noticed a slight vibration in the controls, a warning that the engine could fail at any moment. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders, but she refused to let it overwhelm her. She reminded herself that fear could be dangerous. Focus, calmness, and clear thinking were her allies now. She glanced at the airfield again, her eyes narrowing to measure distance and alignment. The runway was not long, and the surrounding fields were uneven. There was little room for error. Emily's hands worked instinctively, guided by months of training. She checked the wind direction, adjusting her approach to compensate. She maintained a steady descent rate, keeping the plane level while preparing for a landing that would test every skill she had learned. Time seemed to stretch as she approached the airfield. Each second was filled with calculations, adjustments, and communication. Her heart pounded, yet she remained composed. She could hear the faint sound of the engine struggling, each sputter a reminder of the urgency of the situation. She focused on the runway ahead, blocking out everything else. The landscape became a tunnel of concentration, guiding her toward a safe landing. Emily thought about the lessons her instructors had taught her about emergencies. They had emphasized that preparation and calmness were more important than speed. Rushing could make a small problem catastrophic. She reminded herself of that now, taking deep, steady breaths and carefully coordinating every movement of the controls. Her training had prepared her for moments like this, and she refused to let fear dictate her actions. As she neared the airfield, she noticed the runway was clear, though surrounded by tall grass and uneven terrain. There was no time to be nervous. She focused entirely on the approach, aligning the plane perfectly. Each adjustment of the yoke, each press of the rudder pedals had to be exact. The engine sputtered again, but Emily remained unshaken. She knew that every second, every decision could determine whether she would land safely or face disaster. She began the final descent, lowering the landing gear with precision. Her eyes never left the runway, and her mind calculated the landing speed carefully. She recalled her instructor's words, "Trust your training, trust the plane, trust yourself." She repeated those words silently as the runway approached closer and closer. Her hands were steady, her feet precise, and her breathing controlled. The plane touched down with a gentle thud, bouncing slightly on the uneven runway. Emily maintained control, keeping the nose level and gradually reducing speed. She could see emergency personnel gathering at the airfield, alerted by her radio communications. The final moments of the landing were tense, but she guided the plane to a complete stop, her heart racing with a mix of relief and adrenaline. Once the plane was safely on the ground, Emily took a moment to process what had happened. The fuel leak could have ended in disaster, but she had managed to keep control. She felt a wave of exhaustion and relief wash over her. Her hands trembled slightly, but her mind was sharp. She had faced one of the most challenging situations a pilot could encounter, and she had emerged safe and unscathed. Her instructor rushed to her side, praise and concern mixed in his expression. "Emily, that was extraordinary," he said. "You stayed calm, focused, and precise." "I am incredibly proud of you." Emily nodded, a mixture of relief and pride swelling inside her. She realized that her years of preparation, her patience, and her dedication had all contributed to this moment. As emergency crews inspected the plane and secured the area, Emily reflected on what she had learned. Flying was not just about enjoying the view or mastering the mechanics of an aircraft. It was about responsibility, courage, and staying calm under pressure. Today, she had faced fear head-on and had trusted herself and her training to navigate a life-threatening emergency. Even after the adrenaline began to fade, Emily's mind remained alert. She knew that incidents like this were a reminder of the risks of aviation, but also of the importance of preparation and practice. Every lesson, every drill, and every hour of study had prepared her for this very moment. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act decisively and wisely in spite of it. By the time she climbed out of the Cessna, she was no longer just a student pilot learning to fly. She was a pilot who had faced the unexpected and succeeded. The experience, though terrifying, had strengthened her confidence and deepened her respect for the responsibility of controlling an aircraft. It was a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life, and one that would shape her approach to flying and life itself. The morning had started like any other training flight, with Emily Thompson feeling confident and prepared. But the moment the fuel leak had appeared, the routine flight turned into a true test of skill, courage, and quick thinking. As she continued her descent toward the nearest airfield, the reality of the situation sank in. This was no longer just a training exercise. Every second in the air counted, and every action she took could mean the difference between safety and disaster. Emily's heart raced, yet she maintained a calm exterior. She knew that panic would only make matters worse. Her hands gripped the yoke with precision, her eyes scanning the instruments constantly. The engine had begun sputtering more frequently, and she could feel a slight vibration through the pedals and rudder. She reminded herself of the emergency procedures she had memorized, repeating each step in her mind to ensure nothing was overlooked. Her first priority was to stabilize the plane. She carefully adjusted the throttle, mixture, and propeller controls, trying to maximize the remaining fuel's efficiency. She monitored the gauges closely, noting the steady drop in fuel pressure. Emily understood that the engine could fail completely at any moment, and she needed to be prepared to react instantly if that happened. Her training in simulated engine failures became real experience in that moment, and she relied on it heavily. The radio crackled with the voice of air traffic control, guiding her toward the small airfield. "Cessna 172, continue your approach. The runway is clear. Emergency crews are standing by. Maintain heading and altitude." Emily acknowledged their instructions, repeating them aloud to reinforce her focus. She visualized the landing in her mind, breaking it down into steps: approach, alignment, descent rate, flare, touchdown, and braking. Every detail mattered. The approach was not easy. Wind currents shifted unexpectedly, pushing the plane slightly off course. Emily countered each gust with careful adjustments to the yoke and rudder. She knew that even a small error could cause the plane to veer off the runway or tip onto uneven terrain. Her eyes darted between the horizon, the instruments, and the runway ahead. She was acutely aware of the stakes, yet she refused to let fear dominate her thoughts. The fuel leak made the engine unreliable. Emily could feel the sputtering and uneven power output through the pedals. She recalled her instructor's advice: if the engine fails midair, maintain control first, then focus on landing. The words echoed in her mind as she mentally prepared for the possibility of a complete engine failure. She tightened her grip on the yoke, adjusting the plane's pitch to maintain lift while descending carefully toward the airfield. Emily's thoughts shifted briefly to her family. Her parents had always supported her dream of flying, encouraging her dedication and passion. She imagined their pride, but also their worry if anything went wrong. That thought strengthened her resolve. She could not allow the situation to spiral out of control. She had trained for emergencies like this, and now it was time to apply everything she had learned. As the runway approached, Emily focused on aligning the plane perfectly. The landing strip was shorter than usual, and uneven grass flanked its sides. She adjusted her approach angle to account for the wind and the plane's slightly unstable engine performance. Her hands moved instinctively, guided by months of practice, while her mind calculated the remaining distance and descent rate. Every small movement of the controls mattered. Suddenly, a sharp sputter from the engine caused a jolt through the plane. Emily felt a moment of alarm, but she quickly steadied the aircraft. She reminded herself to breathe, to stay calm, and to focus entirely on the task at hand. Panic was the enemy, concentration was her ally. She could almost feel the invisible threads connecting her decisions to the plane's response. Every choice, every adjustment had immediate consequences, and she needed to be precise. The runway grew closer with each passing second. Emily could see emergency personnel waiting at the edge, ready to respond. That sight brought both relief and added pressure. She could not afford to make a mistake now. The plane needed to touch down safely, and she needed to guide it without error. She mentally rehearsed the landing sequence one more time. Reduce speed, lower landing gear, maintain alignment, flare at the correct altitude, touch down gently, and brake gradually. Lowering the landing gear required careful attention. Emily followed the checklist, ensuring the gear was fully deployed. A partial failure could result in a dangerous belly landing, so she confirmed the indicator lights and visually inspected the gear as much as possible. With the gear confirmed, she continued her descent, keeping the nose level and the wings steady. The runway seemed to stretch ahead endlessly, but Emily knew she needed to remain focused until the plane had fully stopped. The engine sputtered again, louder this time, as if warning her of its weakened state. Emily adjusted the throttle, trying to maintain power without overtaxing the failing engine. She could feel tension building in her shoulders, but she refused to let it affect her movements. Each action was deliberate, precise, and controlled. She reminded herself that fear could cloud judgment, but focus and training would guide her safely. As she neared the runway, Emily began the final approach. She reduced speed gradually, keeping the plane steady. The ground rushed closer, and she felt the subtle lift in the wings as the plane began to respond to the decreasing altitude. Her eyes remained locked on the center line, ensuring perfect alignment. She could feel the vibration of the engine fading, a reminder that time was running out. The landing had to be perfect. Emily flared the plane at just the right moment, easing the nose upward slightly to allow the wheels to touch down gently. The main landing gear made contact with the runway with a soft thud, and she felt a wave of relief. She maintained control, keeping the nose level as the plane rolled down the runway. The vibrations from the sputtering engine gradually subsided, and she applied the brakes carefully, bringing the aircraft to a complete stop just before the edge of the runway. Once the plane was safely stopped, Emily exhaled deeply, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. She had successfully navigated an extremely dangerous situation, relying solely on her training, focus, and determination. Her hands were steady now, though her heart still raced from the adrenaline. She had faced a true test of her abilities, one that could have ended in disaster, and emerged unscathed. Emergency personnel rushed to the plane, checking for any signs of further danger. They praised her composure and skill, noting that her calmness under pressure had made the difference. Emily's instructor arrived shortly after, his face a mix of pride and relief. "Emily, that was incredible," he said. "You handled a situation most adults would struggle with, and you did it flawlessly. You should be proud." Emily nodded, feeling both relieved and humbled. She realized that the lessons she had learned, the countless hours of practice, and the focus she had cultivated had all contributed to her success. As the situation settled, Emily reflected on what had happened. She understood that flying was not just about skill or thrill. It was about responsibility, preparation, and the ability to remain calm when faced with danger. Today, she had faced one of the most frightening situations imaginable for a young pilot, and she had risen to the challenge. The experience taught her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act wisely and decisively despite it. Emily knew that this moment would stay with her forever. It was a turning point, a defining experience that shaped her as a pilot and as a person. She had learned that training, focus, and preparation were invaluable, that fear could be managed, and that even in the most difficult situations, calmness and determination could guide her to safety. She felt a newfound confidence in her abilities, a sense that she was capable of facing challenges far beyond what she had imagined. Even after the plane was secured and the emergency crews had left, Emily remained reflective. She walked around the aircraft, inspecting it carefully, appreciating its reliability and resilience. She thought about the hours of study, practice flights, and emergency drills that had prepared her for this moment. Every detail, no matter how small, had contributed to her ability to navigate this crisis. She realized that the journey to becoming a pilot was as much about mental preparation as it was about technical skill. Her parents arrived shortly after, greeted by the relief of seeing their daughter safe. They embraced her tightly, their voices filled with emotion. "We are so proud of you, Emily," her mother said. "You stayed calm and brave, and you handled everything perfectly." Emily smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. She knew that the experience had changed her, had strengthened her resolve, and had taught her lessons she would carry for the rest of her life. That day, Emily Thompson proved that age was not a limitation when combined with preparation, skill, and courage. She had faced a mid-flight fuel emergency, maintained control under extreme pressure, and executed a perfect landing. Her actions were a testament to the importance of training, discipline, and mental fortitude. It was a story of resilience, focus, and the power of staying calm in the face of danger. After the plane came to a complete stop, a wave of relief washed over Emily Thompson. The adrenaline that had surged through her body during the emergency began to fade, leaving her exhausted but deeply aware of what she had just accomplished. She sat in the cockpit for a few moments, taking in the reality of the situation. Just hours earlier, she had been on a routine training flight. Now, she had faced one of the most serious emergencies a young pilot could encounter, and she had come through it safely. Emergency personnel approached the aircraft immediately, checking for any hazards, ensuring that the leaking fuel was contained, and securing the plane. Emily followed their instructions carefully, helping where she could while still processing the intensity of the flight. Each step, from shutting down the engine to ensuring the safety of the surroundings, reinforced the seriousness of the situation. She realized that flying was not just about the thrill or the freedom. It was about responsibility, preparedness, and careful attention to every detail. Her instructor, Mr. Harrison, arrived moments later, his face a mix of relief and admiration. "Emily," he said, "you have shown more composure and skill today than many experienced pilots ever demonstrate. You stayed calm, thought clearly, and executed a landing perfectly under extremely difficult circumstances." Emily smiled faintly, feeling a mix of pride and humility. She knew she had done what she had been trained to do, yet hearing such praise from someone so experienced made her realize the magnitude of her achievement. As the news of Emily's successful handling of the emergency spread throughout the flight school, students and staff alike gathered to congratulate her. Many were astonished that a 17-year-old student pilot had managed a mid-air fuel leak with such composure. Her calmness under pressure, her quick thinking, and her ability to follow procedures flawlessly became a topic of conversation among everyone at the airfield. It was a moment that would be remembered for years. Reflecting on the experience, Emily understood that what had saved her was a combination of preparation, focus, and self-control. The countless hours she had spent practicing emergency drills, studying aircraft systems, and understanding flight mechanics had all contributed to her ability to remain calm and effective. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the ability to act wisely despite fear. This lesson, learned in real time during a life-threatening situation, would stay with her forever. Her parents arrived at the airfield shortly after, their faces filled with concern and relief. They rushed to her side, embracing her tightly. "We are so proud of you, Emily," her mother said, her voice trembling slightly. You stayed calm, you did exactly what you were trained to do, and you handled everything perfectly." Her father nodded in agreement, pride shining in his eyes. Emily felt a surge of gratitude. She knew that her parents had always supported her passion for flying, encouraging her every step of the way, and their support had given her confidence to face this challenge. In the days that followed, Emily was invited to share her experience at the flight school. She spoke to younger students about the importance of training, preparation, and staying calm under pressure. She emphasized that emergencies could happen to anyone, regardless of age or experience, and that being ready mentally and technically was the key to surviving and overcoming them. Her story became a source of inspiration, showing that determination, focus, and courage could allow someone to face even the most daunting situations successfully. Emily also spent time reflecting privately on what had happened. She reviewed the flight in her mind, replaying every step, every decision, and every adjustment she had made during the emergency. She analyzed what had worked well and considered what she could improve for the future. This self-reflection reinforced her understanding that learning as a pilot was a continuous process. Even after successfully handling a major emergency, there was always more to learn, more skills to refine, and more scenarios to prepare for. The experience had a profound effect on Emily's confidence. Before the incident, she had been a dedicated student pilot, focused on learning and improving her skills. After the emergency, she realized that she was capable of handling situations far beyond what she had imagined. Her self-belief grew stronger, not in arrogance, but in a quiet, steady confidence that came from knowing she had faced a real challenge and succeeded. She knew that this confidence would carry her through future flights, training, and eventually a career in aviation. Emily also became more aware of the responsibilities that came with flying. She understood that every pilot must respect the aircraft, the environment, and the passengers or crew who rely on them. Safety was not optional. It was the foundation of every decision, every maneuver, and every flight. This understanding deepened her respect for the profession and strengthened her dedication to becoming an exceptional pilot. In the weeks after the incident, Emily continued her training with renewed determination. She practiced emergency procedures even more diligently, studied aircraft systems in greater detail, and spent extra time learning about fuel management and engine performance. She wanted to ensure that if she ever faced a similar situation again, she would be even better prepared. Her instructors noted her renewed focus and praised her commitment. Emily had transformed from a dedicated student pilot into someone with the experience and mindset of a truly responsible aviator. The flight school also took steps to use Emily's experience as a learning tool for other students. Her story was shared during safety briefings, training sessions, and classroom discussions. Instructors emphasized how proper preparation, calm thinking, and adherence to procedures had allowed a young student pilot to safely handle a potentially catastrophic situation. Emily's experience became a case study in courage, focus, and professionalism, inspiring both students and instructors alike. Despite the public attention and recognition, Emily remained humble. She understood that she had been lucky in many ways. The emergency had occurred close to a suitable landing strip. She had sufficient altitude to manage the descent, and she had the training to act effectively. She knew that not every emergency ended safely, and she was grateful for the combination of preparation, environment, and quick thinking that had allowed her to succeed. This humility reinforced her commitment to learning, practicing, and continually improving her skills. Emily also began thinking about her future more clearly. The incident had shown her that she could handle responsibility and pressure beyond her years. She realized that her dream of becoming a professional pilot was not just a fantasy. It was achievable through dedication, discipline, and continuous learning. She envisioned a career where she could not only fly aircraft but also mentor and inspire future pilots, sharing her experiences and lessons to help others succeed. Her family noticed the change in her. Emily seemed more focused, more confident, and more determined than ever. She spoke about her experiences calmly and thoughtfully, reflecting on what she had learned and how it could help her in the future. Her parents were proud not only of her bravery during the emergency, but also of her maturity, composure, and ability to turn a frightening experience into a source of growth and inspiration. Over time, Emily's story reached beyond her local community. Aviation enthusiasts, student pilots, and even professional pilots learned about the young student who had faced a fuel leak emergency mid-flight and landed safely. Many praised her focus, skill, and courage, highlighting her as an example of how training, preparation, and calm thinking could save lives. Emily took this recognition quietly, using it as motivation to continue learning and improving. She understood that her journey as a pilot was just beginning. Looking back on that day, Emily realized that the emergency had taught her lessons she could never have learned in a classroom or simulation. She had discovered the depth of her own resilience, the power of preparation, and the importance of staying calm under extreme pressure. She had experienced firsthand the responsibilities of being a pilot, the consequences of every decision, and the trust that comes with controlling an aircraft. These lessons would guide her not only in flying, but in every aspect of her life. Emily's experience also strengthened her appreciation for the mentors, instructors, and peers who had supported her journey. She recognized that their guidance had been essential in preparing her for the emergency. She felt gratitude for the lessons, encouragement, and feedback she had received over the years. Their investment in her growth had helped her develop the skills, focus, and mindset needed to succeed when it mattered most. As Emily continued her training and prepared for the next stages of her career, she carried with her a deep sense of confidence, responsibility, and purpose. She knew that the skies could be unpredictable, that emergencies could happen without warning, and that every pilot must be ready to act decisively. Her experience had proven to her that with proper preparation, focus, and courage, even the most daunting challenges could be overcome. In the end, the day that began with a routine flight and a sudden fuel leak became a defining moment in Emily Thompson's life. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, yet emerged not only safe but stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Her story became a testament to the importance of preparation, courage, and calmness under pressure, a story that would inspire others to pursue their dreams, face challenges head-on, and trust in their training, their skills, and themselves. Emily Thompson had proven that age was no barrier to courage, that preparation could triumph over fear, and that a determined young pilot could rise to extraordinary challenges. That day, she had not only survived a life-threatening emergency, but had turned it into a lesson in resilience, focus, and inspiration, a story that would remain with her and those who heard it forever.